Before the sun rises over South Africa's cities and townships, the engine of minibus taxis are already humming. These aren't just vehicles, they're lifelines. Moving millions every day, they beat like a pulse beneath the country's streets, connecting lives, dreams, and daily struggles. For many, these taxis are the first and last step of the daily journey. There are no timetables, no apps, just hand signals, instinct, and a history of survival. In the noise of hooting horns, shouting marshals, and engines idling, a hidden rhythm emerges, chaotic but consistent. This is not public transport in the conventional sense. It's a system born of necessity, not policy. Taxis have filled a gap, a gaping hole left by a state that, for decades, deliberately neglected black mobility. Apartheid-era planning excluded entire communities from accessible transport. In that vacuum, the minibus taxi emerged, not as a solution, but a rebellion on wheels, against the system. From a distance, it looks like disarray. Up close, it's a miracle of coordination. Behind every minibus is a driver pushing for one more fare, a family fed by today's takings, and a commuter relying on it all just to make it work on time. And yet, behind this heartbeat lies pain, violence, bloodshed, a fragile industry built on razor-thin margins, contested routes, and deadly turf wars. This is the story of South Africa's most vital, yet volatile, transport sector, raw, unfiltered, and on the move. To understand the minibus taxi industry, we must go back, not just decades, but generations. Apartheid South Africa was more than just a political regime. It was a machine engineered to immobilize black South Africans, to keep them distant, dependent, and disconnected. Transport wasn't just inconvenient, it was weaponized. In the 1950s and 60s, black workers were forcibly moved to townships far from economic hubs. Daily commuters became treks. Buses were slow, trains overcrowded, and walking long distance often the only option. Public transport was designed to serve a minority and to segregate the majority. People spent hours in motion just to earn a day's wage, and often, a third of it went straight back into transport fees. It was this pressure cooker of oppression that something unexpected took root. In the early 1970s, a few entrepreneurs, mostly township men with vision and courage, began transporting workers in private combis, charging lower fares, moving faster. At first, it was illegal. The apartheid government resisted fiercely. Taxis were impounded, owners were fined, but the need was too great, and the resistance too strong. The movement had already begun. By 1987, after years of lobbying and underground operations, the government reluctantly legalized the 16-seater minibus taxi. But then it wasn't just about transport. It was about pride, ownership, dignity. For many black South Africans, this was the first taste of business, the first time they could own something that mattered and serve their own communities on their own terms. But it came with no support, no subsidies, no infrastructure, just the raw will of people determined to move. No pensions for drivers, no insurance for vehicles, no salary structures, just day-by-day survival, every trip, every passenger, every rand, a lifeline. What started as a form of protest had become a fully fledged parallel economy. Invisible to some, indispensable to millions. As the system grew, so did the stakes. Routes became territories, rankings and ranks turned into empires. And where there is profit without protection, conflict brews. What started in defiance soon had its own wars, internal, violent, bloody. Taxi was erupted in the 90s. Lives were lost, communities torn, but still, the taxis moved. They always moved. Today, when you see a beat-up Toyota Quantum speeding past, you're not just watching transport. You're watching resistance history in wheels, a legacy carved from apartheid steel walls. These are the scars and victories that shaped South Africa's most enduring and complicated transport system. Step inside a South African taxi rank and it hits you, the rhythm, the noise, the unspoken code. There are no timetables, no ticket counter, no digital apps, but everything works, just not the way you're used to. It's not chaos, it's choreography. Drivers shouting destinations, queue marshals organizing lines, money passing hand to hand. It's loud, it's fast, it's alive. This is not public transport, this is street capitalism. Behind the wheel, a driver begins his day before sunrise. He doesn't have a salary, no benefits, no contract. What he makes depends on how many passengers he moves and how many trips he can hustle. It's survival, and the pressure is suffocating. Each day is a race against fuel, traffic, roadblocks, and a cutthroat system. If his vehicle breaks down, it's on him. If he doesn't meet the owner's daily cash target, sometimes over R1,000, he risks losing his only livelihood. The owner, on the other hand, might control a small fleet. Maybe 2 taxis, maybe 20. It's a delicate balance between investment and street politics. One wrong move, the wrong rank, the wrong route, and you could be dragged into a war. Taxi associations, some structured and protective, other ruthless and territorial, control the flow. These are not unions, these are power brokers. You don't just join, you pay, you pledge, you sometimes bleed. The money is real. The industry moves billions of rand a year, all cash, all informal. No tax returns, no government oversight, no banks involved. But with profit comes danger. Disputes over routes can turn deadly. Rivalries explode into drive-by shootings. Intimidation is common, corruption inevitable. Police either look away or play along. Violence isn't the goal, but when regulations fails, violence becomes regulation. And yet, through all of it, there's loyalty. Drivers form brotherhoods. Owners feed entire extended families. Ranks become sanctuaries, places of friendship, jokes, mentorship. A young man with nothing can one day own a fleet. A woman selling snacks at the rank becomes the breadwinner for 3 generations. This is an economy of grit. A place where the rules of the formal world do not apply, because they were never made for people here in the first place. The taxi industry is not perfect. Far from it. But it is honest in its chaos. It exists because the system failed millions. It thrives because it fills a gap no one else dared to close. And behind every blaring hooter and overcrowded van, there is a story of struggle, of hustle, of people doing what they must to move forward, in a country that often holds them back. For decades, the South African government has watched the minibus taxi industry from the sidelines, anxious, confused, often powerless. On paper this should be simple. Regulate, license, tax, but the taxi industry doesn't play by those rules. It grew out of resistance, born illegally, surviving despite crackdowns. So when officials tried to impose control, the industry pushed back hard. Because to them, control was never given, it was earned, in blood and asphalt. Over the years, billions have been spent trying to formalize the industry, with little to show for it. Attempts to introduce subsidies failed. Tax compliance remains a myth. The taxi recapitalization program, meant to modernize the fleet, barely scratched the surface. In some cities, government-built taxi ranks lie abandoned. Politicians talk about integration, safety, and modernization. But on the streets, drivers just want to make it home alive, with enough money to eat and enough fuel for tomorrow. Why the disconnect? Because the taxi industry doesn't trust the state, and for good reasons. In the early years, the government called them illegal. Later, they called them essential. But through it all, there was no real support. No funding, no pension, no insurance, just regulations written in offices far from the townships they claim to serve. So the industry built its own system, its own laws, its own leaders. You can't regulate something you don't understand, and for many in power, the taxis are still a mystery. This mistrust has bred tension, protests, blockades, strikes that shut down entire cities. When drivers die in route wars, the police are slow in respond. When commuters suffer, the blame game begins. Government says the industry is lawless. The industry says the government is absent. In truth, both are right, and that's the problem. It's not just about transport, it's about power, identity, survival. And yet, despite this fractured relationship, they need each other. The state cannot move the nation without the taxis. The taxis cannot evolve without the state's support. But until both sides stop shouting and start listening, South Africans will continue to pay the price, in time, in money, in lives. Beneath the dust and diesel, the violence and survival, there is a future, one that millions of South Africans still believe in. Because the minibus taxi industry is not just a problem to fix, it's a system to understand, nurture, and evolve. It's a living, breathing organism, chaotic, yes, but deeply woven into the DNA of this country, so the question is no longer should we fix it. The question is how we move it forward, without losing what makes it so vital in the first place. The future isn't about erasing the old, it's about reimagining it. Electric taxis, safer routes, digital payments, it's possible, but it starts with real conversations. Real investment, real dignity. The youth already see the cracks and the potential. Startups are trying to digitize taxi ranks. App developers are mapping informal routes. Communities are organizing for safer, more respectful transit. Innovation is not missing, it's just waiting to be taken seriously. But for change to happen, the industry must face its ghosts, and the government must confront its own silence. Because innovation without healing is just another blueprint collecting dust. What the taxis need is space, to grow, to be held accountable, but also be celebrated. They need partners, not puppeteers. Policy built with them, not against them. Systems that honor both speed and safety, hustle and humanity. To the drivers who wake before sunrise. To the queue marshals who keep order without uniforms. To the commuters who know that if taxis stop, life stops, you deserve more. Not just a seat in the back, but a voice in the room. Because the future of transport in South Africa isn't Uber. It's not imported metros. It's right here, on these roads, in these hands, in this movement. So as the country looks ahead, it must ask itself, will we bury the minibus taxi industry in stigma and conflict? Or will we rise with it, rebuild it, and finally recognize it for what it truly is, the engine of our cities, the bridge between townships and opportunity, the heartbeat of how the world moves? This is just the beginning. If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or question, then hit the subscribe button. Share this video with someone who takes a taxi every day, someone who's never seen this side of South Africa. Let's grow this movement together, because how the world moves starts with how we move here at home.